Being compliant is just straightforward. Being maliciously compliant? Well, that's another story. Welcome to this episode of Malicious Compliance. Our first one is from Computer 1313. This story came from an IT coworker who previously worked at a recently expanded data center and was indirectly involved with the legal mess. The data center's company determined that a redundant internet connection was needed and reached out to a few internet service providers with a list of the data center's requirements. One of the service providers underbid the hell out of everyone else. The coworker expressed concerns over that, but management didn't care because the service provider assured them that they would meet all of the requirements. Some long time passed and they heard nothing further from the service provider after the contract was signed. Strange. As the date of the service start approached, the service provider was asked when they were going to visit the data center for a site survey to start their connection. The service provider requested specifications of the data center's connection infrastructure to the internet. Data center said they had no redundant fiber connections and they were expecting the service provider to do the installation work. The email response from the service provider included new people in the email chain. Turns out the requirement didn't specifically state that the service provider had to build the cable infrastructure to connect the data center. The service provider's legal team insisted that the contract only required the service provider to allow the data center to access the internet, and the service provider assumed that the data center already had the physical infrastructure in place for the tap to be turned on. When the company pushed to have the contract cancelled, the service provider's legal team insisted that the company had already agreed to a one-year contract and that they would pay up full even if they couldn't use the internet due to the lack of cables. The outcome of the hostile closed-door negotiations was that the company backed out of the contract by paying the service provider a sum of money that was equivalent to a few months of service, and restart the bidding. This time with the requirements significantly rewritten. When the same service provider put their offer in again, for some reason, it was rejected immediately. I'm pretty sure that this shady service provider knew exactly the kind of work they needed to do, but they probably spent that entire time trying to find the legal loopholes that they used to still get paid and actually do nothing. They're a shady business with shady practices. This next one is by Fandom Freak 1980. Forgive my possible lack of adequate details. This happened a long time ago and I don't have the best memory to begin with, but I read a story a bit ago that reminded me of it. When I, female 43, was 19 to 20 years old, I worked at the local franchise of a popular steakhouse buffet as a cashier and hostess. On our busier days, table turnover could be insane, and me having to help clean a table to seat was a normal thing. Servers bust their own tables. Of course, we would seat tables that were already clean, but sometimes customers would prefer a different location that wasn't. Since it was a buffet, this wasn't a huge problem. We would clean while they filled plates. On one very memorable occasion, this happened to me with a bit of a twist. I took a party to a clean table in Blondie's section. I don't know how old she was, but I would wager early 20s, and she had been there longer than I had. Anyway, when we got there, the head of the party said they would prefer a different table, still in Blondie's section, and indicated one that had not been cleaned yet. I flashed my best customer service smile and said it would not be a problem. They started to turn away and I prepared to clean the table for them. All of a sudden, Blondie rushed up to me and said that the table was unavailable and would random other table be okay instead. I explained the situation and that they had chosen that table specifically, but she was adamant. She explained that she wanted that table and another available to merge for large parties. Tips are almost always better with a large group. I apologized profusely to the current party I was seating and asked if the new table would suffice. They assured me it was alright and took everything in stride as they made their way to the food. The next time Blondie went into the dish area in the kitchen, less than 10 minutes later, I followed her in and proceeded to tear her a new one. It felt really weird to be so thoroughly dressing down anyone older than me. I was raised with old school morals and ideas of respect for those older than me, but she had embarrassed me and I told her so, and that what she had done made it look like I didn't know how to do my job. She apologized but held her stance. I was still fuming, so I did what anyone with teenager brain would do. I went to Mom, or rather, the head server and her supervisor. I told Mom what she had done and why, and she told me that's fine. If she wants large tables, she can have them. For the next at least 15 to 20 minutes, every large group that came in was seated in her section. Remember, busy day, so this was frequent. She eventually came up to the hostess station to ask me to stop. I told her to talk to Mom. Edit. Okay, so a couple of things that have come up. 1. Mom is not actually my mom. She was the oldest, longest employed server there at the time, so she was mom to everyone. 2. I was a teenager and it was very early in my work history, so I did what I was told. Mom told me to do that. 3. This was most definitely not fine dining. If it was, I should hope that we would all have been held to a better standard and the situation would have not been there in the first place. Finally, number 4, this is not Am I the Asshole? I realized that I probably was, but so was she. But this is a different community. I didn't ask. I mean, one could argue Blondie really wanted large groups, so she ended up getting those large groups. I don't see anything wrong with this, and I really don't see you being the asshole at all either for standing your ground and standing up for yourself, let alone just doing what you were told by the supervisor. And our final one is from Lingo Lady 65. This happened in Sweden about 40 years ago, and even if my memories may be a bit hazy, the gist of the story is absolutely true, even if the details are a bit off. I had bought an old clunker of a car to get to my new job, and when I say clunker, that is being nice. It was mainly held together by gaffer tape, and it cost me a whopping $100. Kind of temporary, until I got my first paycheck. On my way home, one of the few police cars in my small town, 25K, pulled me over, which was indeed understandable as it was around midnight and the car being what it was. But it was actually roadworthy, and their issue was with the road tax. They said it was unpaid, and that it was illegal to drive the car. However, they knew who I was, because my dad was the district court judge, so they allowed me to drive home while following me. So I'd actually go home, I guess? I complied, of course. When I parked outside our house, they said they had to take the plate off the car, and that I could pay the tax the next day, go to the station, show the receipt, and get the plates back. Fine, I said. They started rummaging in the trunk of their car and discovered someone had pilfered their toolbox. I offered them to take the keys instead, but nah. They asked if I had a screwdriver in my car, and I said no, had just bought it. I started to talk about other options, but the boss cop told me to just go sit in the car and stay quiet. Not another word from you, little missy line of attitude. I complied, of course. I was just about to say that I could fetch a screwdriver from the tool shed, but they weren't interested in that. I do think they were worried that I'd wake the judge. Oh, horror. Or not. So they opted to call one other car they had roaming the town that night. A canine unit. And that got noisy. We lived near the park, so of course, those cops figured it was an opportunity to let the dogs stretch their legs. Well, I obeyed orders, sat there, was quiet. They were not. First, my father came out in his robe and slippers, looking slightly frazzled and confused. Not exactly someone to be afraid of, but I just sat there as instructed, because I knew what would come next. My mother. "What are you doing with my daughter?" It went downhill from there. I don't think my dad said a word, but my mom certainly ripped them a new one. and got kinda famous on our street for the next few days. Could have been a very quiet and nice interaction here, but well, they wanted to make a deal about the missing tax payment, so a big deal they got, for 10 cents. Simple typo. It's amazing how it's not just America where the cops like to blow up the smallest things into the biggest of deals. At least you complied, did what you were told, and in the end, they got ripped a new one as a result. Alright, that's enough maliciousness for the day. Well, that wraps up this episode of Malicious Compliance. If you liked the video, please drop a like, share my content on all of your social media, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to hit that bell so you're notified every time I upload, and drop a comment down below. It really helps with the algorithm and helps new people find my channel. Thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons, have a great day and stay safe out there.